So for this personal talk about turning the wheel of the Dharma, sharing the Dharma, I'd like to start by showing you this card. Can you see this card? Can you see it? So I'll tell you who it was from and what it says in a little while. So I received this card probably about 15 years ago, I would say, when I was working at the Karuna Trust. I was living in London. I was working at the Karuna Trust where my main role was door-to-door fundraising. I did that for about 8 years, led appeals, Karuna appeals, and did appeals myself, door knocking myself. And I was living in one of the London Buddhist Centre communities. It was probably at that point, I was living with Dhammadasa and Nagarakshita in Samaya Kula. They're both nodding. They're in 2 boxes above each other. That's nice. So we lived together in Samaya Kula at that point. That's a big community with 12 people in, for those of you who know the LBC communities. So I can't remember exactly when I received it or exactly what was going on in my life, but I do know that the card came at a time when things weren't very easy for me. So I can assume at that time, it was probably a time when I was having a particular struggle at Karuna. There were changes going on in the organization. It was a bit unstable in some ways. And I really struggled in that context for a while, for a couple of years. I found it very, very difficult. And also those difficult years at Karuna coincided with the coming to an end of my long-term relationship with a partner. So, that was stirring as well. So I think that was what was going on. But at any rate, I got that card when I was struggling, definitely. And the card was delivered to me by a friend, Tareshwari, who several of you know. Dhammadasa is her private preceptor. So if you don't know Tareshwari, she's an order member around the London Buddhist Centre, a very outgoing, sort of bubbly Australian woman of Jewish heritage, very sort of warm, very talkative, but in a lovely way. So she knew that I was struggling. I ran a study group at the time. It was like a post-Mitra study group, and there was a couple of order members in it as well. And she was in that study group, and I would tell people how I was getting on in the same way as they would tell me how they were getting on. And also Tarishri and I used to meet up for lunch from time to time. So I would tell her that I was, not having such an easy time. So around this time, Tareshwari had become a friend of Bhante. Bhante was still alive during this period. He was living in Madhyamaloka in Birmingham. And she used to go and visit him fairly frequently, and she'd become one of his friends. It seems from what I've heard that Bhante seemed to get on well with sort of feisty, outspoken, very chatty women. I don't know, as well as many other people, but there's a certain sort of person that, he seemed to really click with. And Tareshwari was one of them. And on one occasion, she'd been to see Bhante and she told him about the fact that I was struggling. Now, that was an interesting thing for Tareshwari to talk to Bhante about, because Bhante didn't really know me. Hardly at all. I wasn't one of the generation that was alongside Bhante in the early days, nor did I have any particular reason to have a lot of contact with him. I'd had maybe 1 or 2 face-to-face meetings with him. And also I'd met him in group settings on a few occasions, but not to the extent where I would have imagined that he would recall who I was, not necessarily anyway. I had great respect for him and a great deal of confidence in him as a teacher. But as I say, I didn't really imagine that Bhante would know who I was when Tareshwari told him all about me and my difficulties. However, the fact that Bhante probably didn't know me, that wasn't going to deter Tareshwari. She had no compunction, just telling him all about my life. So she told him that I lived in an LBC community, that I worked for Karana, that I led a study group, you know, that I was very, very, I suppose, involved in collective Dharma activities with others in the Sangha. I suppose that's probably the message that she gave him, as well as that I was finding things hard. And she clearly communicated to him that she was concerned about me, and, you know, probably told him, I don't know exactly how much detail she told him, but she did tell him quite a bit. And then at that point, Tareshri suggested to Bhante, or maybe not even suggested, it might have been strongly urged Bhante, if we know Tareshri, that he write me a card. And she would deliver me this card. So at that point, Bhante was losing his sight, so he needed to dictate things and other people would scribe. So she said that, you know, she would scribe it while he dictated a card to me and she would deliver it to me. And Bhante promptly agreed to the suggestion. So this was this card. This was the card. And I'll read to you what it says. Dear Santavajri, since Tareshwari is here with me, I'm able to send you these few lines. It's very moving, actually. I hope I don't choke up when I'm reading it. I very much appreciate the way you're living your life as a Dharmacharani, and I'm sure you will be able to overcome whatever difficulties you have to face. With much metta, Sangharakshita. And it is his signature on the bottom, so you might just be able to see his signature. So he could write his signature nice and clearly. So it's Tareshwari's writing. I'll just read it again. It's simple, but very moving. Dear Santavajri, since Tareshwari is here with me, I'm able to send you these few lines. I very much appreciate the way you're living your life as a Dharmacharani, and I am sure you will be able to overcome whatever difficulties you may have to face. With much metta, Sangharakshita. So that was the card. So when I received it, I was pleased, but I think I slightly dismissed it, in a sense. I thought, oh, Bhante just sent the card because Tareshwari badgered him, basically, you know. It's not exactly that he hadn't want to send it, but the fact that Tareshwari had suggested it had been the main motivating factor. I thought that at the time. But over the years, I've been remembering that Bhante sent me this card, particularly since he died. And when other people talk about their connection with Bhante and, you know, communication with him, I've been remembering that I got this card from him. And over the years, it's the card and the message has become increasingly significant to me. And I know that Bhante wasn't somebody who would ever do something that he wasn't completely behind. So he didn't just send it because Tareshwari badgered him. So he didn't just do it to get her to be quiet. He sent it because he wanted to. I'm completely and totally confident about that, you know. And I now see it as having received Bhante's blessing to myself as a Dharmacharani. I remember Jnanavarcha talking shortly after Bhante died about having been to see Bhante and having asked for Bhante's blessing. And Bhante said, oh, Jnanavarcha, you always have my blessing. And I felt a little bit sort of envious and thinking, oh, he's had Bhante's blessing, I haven't, and Bhante probably didn't even know who I was, kind of thing, you know. But then I remember the card and I think, actually, I have had Bhante's blessing. That was Bhante's blessing, you know, that was it. What more would I want in a blessing from my teacher? So you might wonder why I'm telling you this story, why it's significant to me in the light of our theme, turning the wheel of the Dharma, spreading the Dharma. Well, I now see that whole episode of Bhante writing to me, albeit at Tareshwari's, at Tareshwari's prompting, that's also an important element of it. So the fact that he wrote to me and the message on the card itself, the actual message itself, I see them as a teaching from my teacher, if you like, Bhante sharing the Dharma with me as one of his disciples. so you can probably see that for me, getting this card and the message that it had in it, was an example of what it means to share the Dharma as exemplified by Bhante, our founder and our teacher. And I think the word exemplified is significant. We touched on exemplification yesterday when we looked at the Sangraha Vastus. Samanatha can sometimes be translated as exemplification. So I see this whole episode as as exemplification from Bhante, how to behave towards your disciples, kind of thing, or towards people who are looking to you to share the Dharma with them. So Bhante didn't say in the card, oh, you should do this or that. So it wasn't like didactic teaching in that kind of way. Rather, he acted in a certain way in response to what he'd heard about me. And so through his behavior, it was exemplifying the Dharma. So it's up to me, I think, to notice that in the message on this card, and choose to emulate him. See that as an example that I can follow, that I can put into practice. So to be a bit more specific, well, how was he embodying teaching the Dharma, sharing the Dharma? Well, first of all, he took an interest in what Tarashri told him about me. He clearly took in what she said. And even though it was her suggestion, he readily agreed to follow it. So he responded to me. He was responsive, and he responded to me as somebody who was trying to practice the Dharma, who'd committed themselves to the Dharma life, and also to somebody who was struggling and having a hard time. So he was exemplifying those things. But then if we look at what he actually says, his words are actually affirming and encouraging. That's what the message. It's not sort of, dear Santavajri, I'm really sorry to hear you're having a hard time, poor you. It's not that. He says, I very much appreciate the way you're living as a Dharmacharani. So there's empathy there and resonance, but there's also confidence. And one of the things that Bhante expresses confidence in those words is confidence in the context I was in the conditions I was in. Because, when he says how I'm practicing as a Dharmacharani, well, Tarashri told him where I lived, lived with other practitioners, that I worked for Karana, that I was, involved in that door-to-door fundraising work, that she knew me through a study group. So he probably was thinking, all of the things that I've been encouraging people to do as helpful conditions for practicing the Dharma life, she's putting them into practice. Well, I appreciate that. That it resonated with Bhante because he thought that these conditions were good conditions. So yeah. And then he says, I'm sure you will overcome any difficulties you may face. It's a very strong word, sure. I mean, fancy being sure that somebody you barely know or don't really know will overcome the difficulties that they may face. It's a very strong thing to say. But again, I don't think Bhante said anything lightly. He's not just trotting something out. I think he meant literally that he was sure that I would overcome any difficulties that I may face. Well, on what basis would he say that? Well, I imagine just simply faith, confidence, shraddha in me as a practitioner. So not in me as an individual, because he, as I say, he didn't really know me, but in me as somebody who was sincerely trying to put the Dharma into practice in my life. Confidence that the Dharma works, basically. That if we put he would probably have said the same about anybody who was sincerely trying to practice and seriously practicing, that if we make that effort to practice the Dharma, we will overcome the difficulties we need to face. We may have to face. So it's Shraddha in the Dharma, reflected back to me. So yes, as I say, I've been finding this card and its message increasingly precious as time goes on. Not least because I would say that I also resonate with Bhante's way of sharing the Dharma in this particular instance. It really resonates with what I suppose how I like to try to share it as well. And maybe that's no surprise, as I'm one of Bhante's disciples. We are in his lineage, if you like. And those of us in the order and those of you preparing to enter the order, this is going to be one of the main ways that we share the Dharma, going to be very much like how Bhante did it. So I realized that for me, one of perhaps the key way of sharing the Dharma with friends, also with you guys who come along to our retreats, perhaps even in less in less formal situations, or even in non-Buddhist situations, like the sort of thing that Taravandana has been talking about. It might be generally my approach, I don't know. But I think that for me, the key way that I like to share the Dharma, if you like, is by helping people, helping friends, helping mitras in the ordination training, etc., helping us clarify what practicing the Dharma looks like in the circumstances of our own individual lives. So helping us clarify what practicing the Dharma looks like in the circumstances of our own individual lives, how it hits the ground. And that's obviously very different for everybody that we have, that I have communication with. So what does it look like for this particular person? And I also like to reflect back where I see that working. Because it does, as Bhante points out in his card to me, the Dharma does work. And I like to reflect back to people where I see change happening and confidence growing and, difficulties overcome. That's something I like to do. And I also like to encourage people to have the confidence to take the next step. Just have the confidence to do the next thing that might feel a bit difficult, but come on, you can do it. And how can you do it? Let's find a way, sort of thing. Yeah. So I like to share, if you like, my confidence in all of us as practitioners, because it is quite simply confidence that the Dharma works. And I have great confidence that the Dharma works. I know it works. And so, why wouldn't I? So yes, as I say, there's a real resonance with the way that Bhante did that for me. I like to do those things for others as well. Sometimes I have conversations with you guys when you come on retreat here, mitras, about what it will mean when they enter the order. And some people express concerns that they say, well, I can't teach the Dharma, I can't give talks, I'm not academic, or maybe they think they're a bit too old, they can't be doing it at that time of life, or, in the case of the older people, or that they don't have very good health and a lot of, energy. So how can they, take part in retreats and giving talks at centers and things like that. And I think it's great and important that if we can teach the Dharma and share it in formal ways, that we do that. I think the Dharma is needed in those formal contexts, and we do need to do that, lead study, give talks, lead retreats, etc. if we can. But if we can't, it doesn't mean that we can't be ordained. And some people think that that's what it means. They think that being an order member is like getting a teaching certificate. The two things are not the same at all. In fact, in some instances, some very, very good order members are better off not teaching because they haven't got the knack for it, So, but they're still really good order members. They're still really effective order members. So when people say that sort of thing to me, when they say, well, I don't think I can teach that, I can't enter the order. Often what I ask is, I say, can you befriend people? And usually, in fact, always up to now, the answer has been, oh, yeah, I can do that. Well, and I think this is enough. I think this is enough. If we can respond and encourage people to practice the Dharma and to allow it to transform their lives, in our friendships with people, that's basically, that's what it means to be an order member, first and foremost. First and foremost, that's what it means. Some of us, as I say, will teach and, you know, in more formal settings, and that'll be very much valued. But, you know, assuming we live a natural lifespan, you know, till we're old, there'll come a time when we won't be able to do that anyway. But right until the day we die, as long as we've got our faculties, we can still be a friend to people in that sort of way. In fact, several order members who, you know, did live into their 80s, 90s, well, Bhante himself, of course, is an example of this, carried on befriending people and encouraging them in this sort of way, way after they were doing anything formally. So yes, this is what it means to be an order member. First and foremost, we're aiming to be a friend to others in the order, particularly, and to people in the Mitra Sangha, particularly, but also in the world at large, as Tara Vandana so beautifully exemplified. Maybe not as explicitly, but it's the same thing. It's what we're doing. And it's through friendship, first and foremost, that we in Triratna share the Dharma with others. In fact, even if we are teaching formally, that sort of capacity to befriend others needs to be in place, and very effectively, if we're going to be able to share the Dharma formally in an effective way. If we're not able to do the friendship bit, we'll not be able to do the sharing the Dharma formally bit. So that's the basis, I would say. And this is, as I say, exemplified by our teacher Bhante, very much so. So I just want to finish by reading a little quotation from Bhante's little pamphlet, which is called My Relation to the Order. And Bhante, in this pamphlet, is exploring different ways in which order members could relate to him and see him. This is the conclusion he comes to. So he's been exploring whether or not he's a guru, and talking about a talk that he gave, I think probably in the 70s, called Is a Guru Necessary? But anyway, this is what he says about guru. And then he goes on to say, to make a different point. He says, I would drop the guru concept. I would drop the guru concept. And as I said, preferably not apply the word guru to myself, nor have it applied to me by others. Quite clear by that. Then he says, we have in Buddhism the wonderful term spiritual friend. And this I'm more content to apply to myself and have applied to me by others. Indeed, there are times when I think that spiritual friend, in inverted commas, is almost too much, and that just friend would be enough. Let me, therefore, be content with the appellation friend and stand to the order simply in the relation of friend.